If you're young, live in the city, you might not need a car full time. But if you move out in the suburbs, you have a couple of kids, you need to drive them to football practice every day or whatever it is, then it might be a good idea to have a car. But that journey, seeing how we could get in customers early at the way lower customer acquisition cost and actually nurture that relationship, get them into the brand at a younger age, and increase the probability of keeping them as Volvo customers for life.
Everyone knows Volvo, obviously, but tell us what Volvo Car Mobility is. And as CMO, I'd love to know a little bit more about what your role entailed.
Yeah, everyone knows Volvo. What everyone might not know that there is actually two Volvo. It's Volvo Cars that you're familiar with if you've ever driven one of their cars, but there's also Volvo, who makes big trucks and heavy machinery and boat engines, etc. So two different companies that share the same brand, but this part is Volvo Cars, individual cars, if you like. So Volvo Car Mobility was an effort to, I think, understand what the future of mobility would look like by actually trying to do it. So Volvo is a company that has almost 100 years history and been doing great cars for a long time, but they also see that they kind of have an older demographic, and understand that people's relationship to cars and car brands are changing over time. And for the environment, if nothing else, we are probably not going to use cars in the same way in the future. So in an effort to actually understand that and meet the new younger generation, they wanted to explore this mobility field and see, okay, if you don't want to own a car, but you still want to get around in a comfortable way and safe way, let's create a service for that. So that was kind of the starting point for this. And so Volvo Car Mobility is a car sharing service. And the idea is perhaps to build a Airbnb for cars, basically. I think the statistics from Stockholm, where I live, that 95% of the time privately owned cars stand still. And you probably, if you walk out in whatever big city you live in, you see a lot of cars just standing still. And that's a waste of space. It's a waste of environmental resources. But if more people can use the same resources, that's better for the cities, it's better for the environment, and it's better for your wallet as well. Because owning a car is a big expense for most people. So that was the idea. So I was hired as a CMO, not from the very beginning, but pretty soon after the launch of this. And as a CMO, I was in charge of everything related to marketing, basically. So everything from, campaigns, branding, web, customer communication, but also a lot of my time was as part of the leadership team. And then, you deal with everything that relates to the company. And of course, stakeholder management, since we were owned by Volvo, but as a fully separate entity. So we had our own management and our own developers and our own marketing department, etc. So, and I think that was also an thing for Volvo to try to work differently, because, as I said, they have a 100-year history of making cars, and of course that is history and way of doing things, and they wanted this to be done totally differently to learn something about rapid development and a new way of working. Basically.
That was a great answer. Yes. I am just curious to know of all of the initiatives that you worked on. Some, when I first met you, you were knee deep in, but of all of the initiatives that you worked on, what excited you the most? What sticks with you even now?
I can mention also that the company started out with a different name. It was named M in the very beginning. And when we had reached some kind of maturity, we rebranded it to Volvo On Demand. So that was the kind of brand public facing name, even if the company was Volvo Car Mobility. So that was, of course, very exciting, but also in line with more traditional, marketing work to rebrand the company. What kind of excited me the most was very early on, we tried to use some kind of machine learning to understand the lifetime value of customers in a few weeks after they enter the service, which is, of course, difficult since that's a very short life, only 2 weeks. But since Volvo know very well how much they make on a car, and a very expensive car, and you buy a new car every 5th year or whatever it is. But here we had a service that the lowest price point was like $10 for sharing a car or using one of our cars for 1 hour. So understanding the lifetime value of a customer as soon as possible, that was something that was very exciting to work on, using every data point we can get hold of and try to see with machine learning and statistics and also a bit of gut feeling, see, okay, this customer that's only 2 weeks into their relationship with us, are they going to be a long-term customer? And we were able to see that we high probability very early. And so that was very exciting to see, because then we could determine, okay, how do we kind of nurture this relationship and more effort on those clients with highest potential to be valuable for us in the long run. So that was very exciting. Later on, kind of the same story, but when we started to work on tying all of Volvo's relationship with customer together, saying that if we can get a customer in for those $10 into our service, maybe later down the line, they were also more likely to buy a Volvo and at a different stage of their life. I mean, if you're young, live in the city, you might not need a car full time. But if you move out in the suburbs, you have a couple of kids, you need to drive them to football practice every day or whatever it is, then it might be a good idea to have a car. But that journey, seeing how we could get in customers early at the way lower customer acquisition cost and actually nurture that relationship, get them into the brand at a younger age and increase the probability of keeping them as Volvo customers for life. Basically, that was very interesting and difficult work.
So at that point, you were leveraging AI. I mean, AI was giving you some answers here. Is that right?
Yeah.
To what you're trying to solve.
Yeah, because it's so difficult. I mean, there are people that are way smarter than me, but for everyone, it's very difficult to keep a lot of data points in their head at the same time, which machines are pretty good at and can help you actually see patterns where it's impossible to keep track of. Or, I mean, all customers are basically different, even if you can group them, of course, but just keeping all the data points in mind is impossible for anyone. But with the help of machine learning, you can actually see or understand those patterns better, because it's difficult to see if you have a person that's 20 years old, are they a potential buyer of a car 30 years from now? I'm not saying that we have solved all of that, but we get a better understanding of what patterns to look for and how to focus your efforts better.
Okay. I can see how that experience at Volvo got you fired up about AI and excited, because it seems like from there you've been really steeped in it, just like knee deep and learning more. You've even honed your skills in artificial intelligence through MIT Sloan's executive programs, which is incredible. So I'm sure the more you learn, the more you want to learn. And I think part of what excited us about talking to you today, many things, but this topic of AI, and I think people listening, some people have dipped their toe into it. Some people are intimidated by it. Some people have been working in marketing and have zero strategy. I think others are just burying their head in the sand. But what are some things that you see? I guess we want to understand the opportunities that you see available to us as marketers specifically that are not really being taken advantage of. So like, where could AI have some impact in a marketer's workflow?
That's a big question, of course. And I think whatever I would say that you should do this in the future, someone has already done it tomorrow. It's so much happening in this field. So I'm not saying that I know everything just because I took a course at MIT and been interested in this. But there are some things that when I talk to people, that I kind of find is lacking at the moment, because AI is so interesting and so much fun and has so much promise of changing things for the better. So I think sometimes we focus too far down the line. We're looking at, when AI can replace all our photographers, or when AI can, do all the analytics for us, or when, can write all the copy for us. But I think what people not really focus on today is the boring tasks. Or the thing that actually occupy us every day. What we started at, one thing that was exciting during my time at Volvo was that they released the ChatGPT, the 3.5 version. The first version was released in 2019, I think. But that version actually made it available for everyone to start playing around with it. And if your days are pretty similar to mine, I guess. There's a ton of meetings. You have to write emails or text or proposals or presentations and whatnot. And you have to deal with all these things. What you really want to do, if you're on the agency side or if you're on the CMO, is like cracking the next idea, doing the next thing that actually add values. And meeting does normally not add value to the same extent. But one example that we started out very early was to take our brief process, written briefs probably, but you have to define
like a creative brief for an assignment.
Yeah.
Like a
creative brief.
Creative brief or a strategic brief. Yeah.
Yeah. some sort of brief, and you need to go to your manager to have that approved, and you need to have someone review it, you have to present it, and you have to redo it. All of that is kind of boring work, but very, very important, because otherwise, if that step isn't done properly, you will run into a ton of problem later. So we, with the help of ChatGPT, just defined prompts that would help you complete the brief in a way that was better and more complete, that we could share with everyone, which saved a ton of time for me, for example, that have to approve a lot of briefs. They were kind of ready when they got to me, instead of me having to go back to people and say, you haven't done this part, or this part is unclear, or spending time on nagging rather than, focusing on, okay, how does this add value? And that was a very easy thing to do. It took like a couple of hours to write that script and share it with everyone. As an example, those are the things that would save a lot of time for people in an organization that you can actually then spend on the creative part, because that's where the fun is and that's where you add value, or figuring out a better strategy. So I think looking at your entire workflow, really not the fancy stuff that AI might be doing for you down the line, but what can it do today? I think that would save up a lot of money, because what I've seen so far, I know a lot of people that are more creative than AI currently. Let's give the creative people or the strategic people more room to do their work. I think that's the biggest use for AI right now.
Yeah, you're making a really big point. I think a point that's often overlooked. On our last call, when we talked to you, we were talking about this idea of like the sexy creative outputs versus the mundane kind of repetitive tasks. And I think even just at the agency where we are, as all this stuff started getting more press, we're thinking about Mid-Journey. We're thinking about creating comps and all through AI and the final outputs. That's where we started. I think then we took a giant step back and thought, okay, but that's the fun part. That's the stuff we do really well. And the technology is progressed a lot. It's incredible. It's impressive, but it's not quite there yet. Why aren't we focusing on freeing up our time so we can do those tasks? And freeing up our time means some of the stuff you're talking about, the repetitive things, the admin things, right? So jumping back to the brief, can you talk about that a little bit more? Because when I think about a brief, for anyone listening, it's going to be, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Who are we talking to? What's the key insight? What does success look like? There's just some kind of standard questions that might be part of a brief. How do you get that process going using AI? Someone still has to create a draft, right? Or something. Is that correct? Or walk me through kind of like how that works a little bit more.
It depends on what level of brief and how big the task is that you're trying to solve, of course. I mean, some briefs, if we take my example of rebranding our service to Volvo On Demand, then there's a lot of work to understand where is our target audience, what do they know about the brand, why aren't they picking a Volvo before an Audi or a BMW. That's a lot of research that needs to happen before you actually write a brief. But many times you have an assignment where you know a lot of stuff, but and as you say, you have some standard things in the brief that you need to be compliant about. It might be budgets, it might be, SEO, you need to have all the words correctly and all those steps. So I think it depends on what kind of brief. But of course, you can use AI for analyzing your target audience. If that's something you haven't done, you can get help with that. But just getting it structured in order, making sure you have covered all the points, then you probably have people that are able to, figuring out the budget. But sometimes I've seen you get a budget that isn't worked through or isn't approved by the right person. All of that you can just have, instead of having a manager checking it, you can have AI with a prompt that actually check it for you. So that saves up a ton of time. It doesn't take away, I would say, the creative work on saying, okay, is this a good idea? Now the brief is complete, but is it a good idea to actually go forward with it? I think that is still the human judgment that has to take care of that part. But there is so much time that is spent on actually getting to that stage where we can see, okay, now I understand what we want to do. Is it a good idea to actually do it? AI helps along the way, but it doesn't solve the real question. But it gives you, with the help of AI, you can take your time to really figuring out, should we go ahead with this or not?
Are there other things in your daily workflow where you've found opportunities, whether you've implemented them or not? What are some things you're seeing that have worked or you get excited about as you think about trying to optimize your workflow and cut down on tasks? Tell me what you're seeing.
Yeah, but as you talked about, the other side of the creative work is also very interesting, because also there are a lot of things. I mean, you come into the office on a Monday and you have to be creative from start. I mean, using the creative, I mean, you probably have your own creative processes, but they're normally similar. It's like you have to create a lot of ideas, you have to turn ideas around, you have to make examples, you have to flesh them out to see, okay, is this something we want to build further on? A lot of that work,
Right.
just churning out a lot of different varieties for you to keep working on or iterate on. I mean, that can be done by AI tools today. So you have them ready to start evaluating when you come in on Monday, as an example. So I think you get a lot of, to me, it's like having a 100 junior staff in your office that can you say, flesh out 100 of these ideas or take these ideas in a different direction. And we see, okay, one of those 100 ideas is actually something we want to continue to work on. I think that you can see it as an army of workers that actually help you get past those first stages of the idea work. And I mean, if you look at Midjourney, I wouldn't trust Midjourney to make, a series of fantastic imagery that are all on brand over time. I think that's so far very difficult, but getting the idea across in a presentation, showing your ideas to the team and say, okay, you understand the direction. Can we work further on this so we can give the photographer in the end a brief that he understands or she understands? I think that's where you can utilize AI. So you don't have to wait for any new technology for doing that.
Yeah, we have a new employee at the agency. We call her MJ. We say, see if MJ can work on it. That's Midjourney. So she's available for quick comps or quick things. It's overwhelming, I think, as a marketer. You're torn and you're pulled in so many directions each day. Like, it's overwhelming probably to think about creating a long-term AI strategy. How do you would coach people to get started on that? Like, what are some of the more achievable bite-sized milestones to work towards?
To me, it's always, I mean, right now, since AI is so exciting and you say, let's start with Midjourney. It's like back in the days when you started your campaign strategy with, I know where we can shoot the film. It's like, that's to me the wrong end to start in, but be very, very clear what your business strategy is. First of all, it's like, is your business strategy, is that a differentiation strategy or is it a cost leadership strategy? What are you trying to accomplish? Is it just saving costs? Okay. And be more effective. Yeah. Then focus your AI strategy there. Where can that take away tasks that today drives cost? If it's time or resources or just pure investment, then you can focus your efforts there. If it's that you need differentiation, then you have to work with AI to support your creative efforts or your strategic effort, because that's not always clear to people, is my experience. It's like, what is the actual business strategy we are as a marketeers trying to support? If you get that right, I think it's easier to see, okay, where can we then use AI to support that business strategy? And if you support the business strategy, you will also get a lot more support from management, I think, or from the client if you're on the agency side, if you really understand that. Because if you're going in the opposite direction against the business strategy, you will always run into problems. And then I think it's in an organization very important to see that this is something that either you believe is going to change the way we work fundamentally in the future, that AI is something that actually going to influence everything, or if you believe that it's a cool tool to play around with. I mean, is it a paradigm shift? Then you need your entire company on board. You need to work with your legal department, with your HR department, with your finance to actually work on a strategy together, because it's not then a matter of if this is a tool that's going to help marketeers, it might actually disrupt the entire business. You have to understand where you believe this is going. I mean, personally, I think it's going to be a paradigm shift, and we're going to look back not so many years from now and say, how could we ever have lived without AI support? As we talk now about how could anyone live and work without internet? But I think we will get there with AI too.
Well said.
That was a long answer.
I have a tough question. Yeah, but a good one. And I think just how do humans interact with this technology right now going forward? That's the core of it. And I love the example too of with Volvo, a global corporation. These tiny tweaks are exponential when you consider the impact across a global corporation when just you switch a step along the way. The efficiencies are exponential for so many. And no matter what size company you, our audience, are at, there are so many tweaks along the way that you can start to incorporate. That's what I'm taking away even from what you say about, I love that one of the milestones is cultural adoption within your business and just helping your team think together about how do I personally view this and how do we personally and collectively view this, and then start to move together towards finding those efficiencies that over time have big impact. So I have a tough question with no clear answers, but in light of what you've just shared, what do you envision the agency and client relationship evolving to?
Yeah, and that's I think a really interesting question that I'm kind of struggling with a clear answer to. So let's start there. I don't have the answer, but I think it will change. As I see it, there is an intersection traditionally between agencies and clients, where normally a client has some sort of brief and a bag of money, and they go to an agency and say, deliver amazing stuff to me, and the agency work hard and come back with some sort of solution, which is, normally some sort of image, moving or not, a strategy and some copy, and then it's placed somewhere. But if this keeps going and we use machines more and more on the agency side to actually produce these solutions, in the beginning, I think a lot of agencies can make more money because you produce cheaper, but you deliver the same value, so you can have a bigger cut of the cake, perhaps. But clients are not dumb, so they will realize that you use machines to actually produce this. I want to pay less for that, so the amount of money for the same thing will probably go down. But I think the real question is then, if you as an agency train this machine to actually produce and learn the customer's brand, who owns that brand then, if it sits in your machine on the agency side? Or should I, as a client, make sure that I have, to make it easy, that prompt that actually knows my brand? But normally on the client side, you don't know the creative stuff or how to actually get things done that consumer like and consumer understand and build affinity to a brand. So I think that will be very difficult. And how do you charge for a millisecond of a machine that creates amazing copy? Because it might just be, when you train the machine, just a click away, and then you have an awesome headline for a campaign. How do you charge for that? I don't have the answer, but if I would guess, good customers, good clients will realize that this has to be a joint effort with their agency. You might get a lot better result if you work together and realize that you have to kind of share the investment and share the output. And I think bad clients will try to squeeze their agency, but they will then be left with nothing really. So you have to kind of figure out a way, how do you create value both for the client and the agency, because otherwise one will drop out and then you have nothing, because I think machine won't do it on their own for a very, very, very long time. And
then there's intellectual property rights, which I don't know that I have an answer to either, especially with imagery. Like, I feel like we're coming up against that already. Where's this imagery being pulled from? Who owns it? Lots of looming questions there.
Definitely. And that's why, in the AI strategy you talked about or asked about before, is like, you have to work from now with your legal department. So you're kind of in sync with them, because if you start that work 3 years from now, it will be too late. You have to kind of work with your team so you're all on the same page. Even if it's small step now, it's like compound interest. If you start saving now, it will add up in the end. So start early. I think that's the key here.
As we kind of look ahead to all the tools in the marketing toolbox, who will the winners be? Who will the losers be? Sometimes I just think about that in terms of, the winners are the ones that are going to be pressing forward and just remaining curious and continuing to learn and continuing to try things. But from your perspective, who will the winners be and who will the losers be?
I would love to say that it's open source code that will win, because that would be better for everyone. But I think it's so costly to build these tools. So I just assume the winners would be the ones backed by big corporations that can actually afford to train these models, because it's huge. So if it's Google or if it's Microsoft or whomever, but we haven't seen what Apple's going to do yet. But I'm not the expert in that field. I just use them, the ones that are readily available.
From the CMO seat, what's one thing you would do today, I guess, to move forward into AI, if you have not done much so far?
If you haven't done much so far, I would say do something tonight. Whatever you do, you're one step, closer to actually getting value from it. I think most people today have. Yeah. I would be surprised if there's any CMO out there that hasn't, played around with the tools. But I think my personal advice would be to get structure in place. And there's so much to learn from the academic world, how they just treat knowledge. And if you have a structured way of whatever you do, say, store that. If I write the prompt, the lousiest prompt in ChatGPT, and I get some sort of result, I can write that down in a simple Excel sheet. It's like, here's what I prompted, here's the result I got. Because then someone else can take a look at it and say, okay, I'm going to improve this one. So here's improvement to that. And then you can share it with the rest of the organization. If you just have isolated islands that are good at things, you won't build organizational knowledge. And I think that's key. If you're a team that can actually help building knowledge in a structured way, then you can also, years from now, when you have machines that do a lot of things for you, you will be able to explain what they have done. Because I think that's a factor that's often overlooked, that we need to be able to understand what the machines do and explain it to other people. So we can't just say that AI did that, so I'm not responsible. We kind of need to have an understanding of the process to come up with new ideas, or to analyze data. We need to be able to explain what actually happened. So a structured way from the very beginning. It's not difficult. Write it down on a list. We call it prompt library.
Well,
it's a pretentious world, but every library starts somewhere.
Yeah. Well, what you said earlier resonated with me too, is just start somewhere, but like begin with the end in mind, right? You got to, what's the strategy? What's the problem we're trying to solve? And then start the building blocks from there, instead of just chasing shiny objects. Because I think when I think about at our agency, some of the ways that we can leverage AI, to your point earlier, it's not super exciting. I mean, like we have otter.ai, I think it's called, which is like meeting transcriptions and summaries. They get sent out to everyone after a meeting. So, little things like that can be incremental changes to cut down on tasks or admin tasks, or just things that eat up your day, right? That where you'd rather be putting it towards creative energy. So it's all around us, the opportunities, and then just trying to figure out where we can leverage the tools. That definitely resonated with me, and I appreciate your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's whenever you talk to someone about these things, you get new ideas. But and I think what you're on to there is the key, at least for me. It's like, how do we free up time for the most valuable things we can do? Because all our days are filled with stuff that doesn't really add value, I think. So just having an endless amount of time to be creative or be strategic or create value, or build relationship or whatever it is, that would be amazing. So that's where we should
absolutely
be heading.
Absolutely. Well, you're active on LinkedIn, and I know that people can find you there, and you are a great resource on this topic, but just generally as a marketing resource as well. So I will direct people to LinkedIn to look you up.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us. We're so honored to have you, and look forward to what's ahead.
Yeah.